Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 31 in the Be With Me. We're in the book of 1 Timothy in chapter 6. The title today is, How Did I Get to Be Immortal? So the truth is, you are immortal. And the question is, how did I get to be that way? Our official passage is from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 16, and it talks about a characteristic of God who alone has immortality. It's in this passage about just elevating the Lord. He who is blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who alone has immortality. So think about this. You couldn't be that way if when you were created, your creator didn't have the capability to make you immortal. But you are immortal. This is the positive way to say this. And I am immortal because the one who made me and made you had the capability, the capacity, and the characteristics of immortality. So he had it to be able to give it to you. So think about a new baby. We celebrate the birth of a new baby, and we celebrate the first day here. And at death, that same baby that we celebrate, if they're a believer, Second Thessalonians says we don't grieve like unbelievers do. So if they're a believer, we kind of celebrate their death, that it's their first day there. Now we grieve here, of course, but we see a little bit further and know that believer isn't dead. They're just transported to a different address. So similarly, we honor the parents' naming of that child. A name is given for use here, and I think Jesus is going to give us a new name there. Revelation 2:17 says, "To the one who conquers, I will give him a white stone with a new name written on that stone that no one knows except the one who receives it." So I think God's going to give us a new place, a new address, and a new name. Yesterday we talked about that though Jesus wasn't sinful, he took on payment for sin. So though Jesus wasn't sinful, he was made to be sin. He took on the payment for sin so that we, who are sinful, avoid the payment for sin. It's called substitutional sacrifice. Similarly, and I'm kind of using that as a picture of what God does with death and mortality, so that though Jesus was immortal, somehow he takes on mortality so that we can avoid the mortality of death. So you had deathlessness, Jesus, but took on death. And you defeated the last enemy. Death is described as the last enemy in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 26. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. For God has put all things in subjection. So this means we talked about submissiveness, which is the same root of the word. Submissiveness is a voluntary subjugation of ourselves. Death is not going quietly and is not volunteer. It has to be swallowed up by something more powerful. It has to be swallowed up by life. 2 Corinthians 5:4. For while we are in this tent, we groan. And a little later, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. So the Lord has deathlessness, but took on death. And he defeats this last enemy. So God uses his immortality to help us in our mortality. And our deathless God bore death. Our immortal God bore mortality. So we say as Christians that we are saved from sin and death. We're saved from sin by sinless sacrifice. That's what saves us from sin. An immortal sacrifice saves us from mortality. So our mortal status, what we see here now, is temporary. The truth is that we are immortal. How did we get that way? Because God made us that way. He had that characteristic and gives it to us. So choose this day how you'd like to spend eternity. I suggest you spend it with God. Receive him today and do so. Or you can say, and he gives us this option, I'd like to be separated from God both today and all days to come. We define that as hell. So we were created immortal by an immortal God to be with him. for a long season. Now, there's been a little chink in the armor. That happens in Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. And this is as a description of the curse, which is, by the sweat of your face you shall eat your bread, till you return to the ground. So that's where death comes in. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. That is, until this happens, until our status is redeemed. So in the meantime, we are facing death, at least here. But that does not mean that we are not immortal. We are going to live forever somewhere, whether that be without God or with God. I suggest with him. We were created immortally by an immortal God to be with him. For a long season, we are experiencing death right now, death and dust. That has been our experience. But that's not the way he created us. He created us immortally to be with him. We made some errors along the way, and there was some punishment along the way. But ultimately, we are immortal creatures, and we are going to go be with him forever. So how did I get to be immortal? It's the way he made us. Let's go be with him. Thanks for listening.